Prince Harry asked his American girlfriend Meghan Markle to be his wife, and she said yes.
All the stars were aligned, everything was just perfect. It was this beautiful woman just tripped and fell into my life.
You know, the things from long ago when the Americans would come over and marry into royalty, so we're glad that's happening again.
We are all good to go as we keep moving forward towards the royal wedding day.
Prince Harry's engagement to Meghan Markle is a game changer for the royal family.
So the wedding is slated for May. I won't be invited to that either.
How deeply hurt Queen Elizabeth was by Prince Harry's actions.
Meghan Markle really does fit into the fairy tale here. The princess from LA.
Clearly, if he's having arguments with her and Meghan is refusing to show her wedding dress, I mean...
Nobody could mentor Meghan. Impossible.
Yeah,
She's a law
I
unto
agree.
herself.
The woman of the moment, Ms. Meghan Markle, making its way towards the west steps of St. George's Chapel.
Liza to be, I mean, she had almost 60 years or 50 years of planning weddings. She wanted her to be involved. And Meghan said, well, I can't.
Goodness me, you're marrying into the royal family. The one person you show your dress to is the Queen.
Meghan's refusal to share details about her dress and Harry's reported rudeness deeply troubled the Queen.
The Queen was annoyed by the Sussexes' behavior during the planning and felt sidelined.
And Harry will write you a letter, and he wrote a letter, and he said, but my grandmother's quite content with what we're doing. And then
I don't think, in my personal opinion, they have taken accountability for what happened in the past.
February 2018, Buckingham Palace. 3 months before Prince Harry married Meghan Markle, he sat down with his grandmother for a conversation that left her rattled, and according to one of her closest confidants, genuinely frightened for him. The Queen didn't talk about it publicly. She never does. But she talked about it privately, to a cousin she trusted more than almost anyone else in her orbit. And decades later, that cousin's account is finally surfacing. Not through a tabloid leak, not through an anonymous palace insider, but through one of the most respected royal biographers alive, drawing on notes and conversations that sat quiet for years. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. Here's what actually happened in that room. The source is Lady Elizabeth Anson. If that name doesn't ring a bell, it should. She wasn't a distant relative trading on the family name for attention. She was the Queen's first cousin, the daughter of the Queen's aunt, and for decades she ran one of Britain's most exclusive party planning firms, Party Planners, organizing royal celebrations, state occasions, private family gatherings. She had the Queen's ear in a way almost nobody outside the immediate family did. And crucially, she wasn't performing loyalty for cameras. She spoke to journalists rarely, and when she did, it was in confidence, off the record, to people she'd known for years. And Anson's position wasn't just social. Party planners handled logistics for events going back to the 1980s, christenings, jubilees, private dinners at Windsor that never made a single headline. She was in the room for decades of family history that never got written down anywhere else. When she talked, she wasn't guessing at palace dynamics from the outside. She'd watched them unfold in real time at close range for most of her adult life. Royal biographer Sally Bedell Smith was one of those people. Smith has covered the monarchy for over 3 decades. Books on Diana, on Charles, on Elizabeth herself, the kind of access-driven biography that takes years to build and even longer to verify. And in her Substack, Royals Extra, Smith recently published something she'd been sitting on. Anson's own account of what the Queen told her in the weeks after that February meeting with Harry. Anson died in 2020 at 79. She can't confirm this herself anymore. That matters. You should know that going in. This is Smith publishing recollections from a source who's no longer here to be asked follow-up questions. But Smith's reputation was built on exactly this kind of long-game reporting, and the details line up with a wedding planning process that was, by nearly every account, more fraught than the smiling photographs suggested. So what actually happened? According to Anson, the Queen felt shut out. Not in a dramatic tabloid sense, in a quieter, more specific way. She wasn't being told things. And for a monarch who'd spent 70 years being told everything, that absence felt loud. The first flashpoint was procedural. almost bureaucratic on its surface. Harry wanted the Archbishop of Canterbury to conduct the wedding service at St. George's Chapel, Windsor. Reasonable enough, the Archbishop is the most senior clergyman in the Church of England, but St. George's Chapel doesn't answer to the Archbishop of Canterbury day to day. It answers to the Dean of Windsor. That's not a technicality to the people who run these institutions. It's jurisdiction. And Harry, according to Anson, never asked for the Dean's approval before making the arrangement. Anson didn't mince words about how she read it. Harry seems to think the Queen can do what she wants, but she can't. She reportedly told Smith. Even the monarch, the ceremonial head of the Church of England, doesn't get to override the Dean of Windsor on his own turf. That's the piece Harry apparently missed, or didn't think mattered. The second flashpoint was smaller in scale, but bigger in feeling. The Queen wanted to know about the dress. Every bride keeps some secrets. Sure, that's tradition. But Meghan reportedly wouldn't share any details with her future grandmother-in-law at all. Not the silhouette, not the designer, nothing. And for a woman who'd watched Diana's dress be sketched and re-sketched under intense royal scrutiny 37 years earlier, watched Catherine's Alexander McQueen gown go through its own layers of family involvement 7 years before that, this felt like a door being quietly closed in her face. Individually, neither of these things sounds explosive. A scheduling oversight. A dress kept under wraps, but put them together, and you get a pattern the Queen was reading in real time. Her grandson's wedding was happening around her, not with her. And there was a third piece, quieter than the other two, but no less telling. According to Anson, the Queen kept hearing about wedding decisions secondhand, through aides, through staff, through people who weren't Harry himself. Small things. Guest list questions, timing changes, the kind of detail that on its own means nothing. But stacked week after week, it built into something that felt less like an oversight and more like a pattern of exclusion. For a monarch who'd spent her entire life at the center of every decision that touched her family, even minor ones, that pattern was hard to ignore. That's the context for the meeting. Here's what Anson told Smith about the confrontation itself. In February 2018, Harry was rude to his grandmother, not for a moment, for 10 minutes. A sustained stretch of tension, in a room where sustained tension almost never happened, at least not directed at her. 10 minutes doesn't sound like much until you think about who was on the other side of it. This is a woman who'd managed prime ministers through wars, who'd sat across from world leaders during crises that could have ended nations, who'd buried a sister and a mother in the same year and appeared in public days later, composed, dry-eyed, working. The idea of her grandson raising his voice, or his tone or his frustration, at her for 10 uninterrupted minutes wasn't just uncomfortable. According to Anson, it left her very worried. Not angry, worried. That distinction is worth sitting with because it tells you something about how the Queen actually processed conflict within her own family. She'd faced down disagreement her entire reign. Disagreement over Diana, over Charles and Camilla, over Margaret and Peter Townsend decades before that. She knew how to hold her ground. What she reportedly hadn't expected was this particular grandson, the one she'd always had an easy warmth with, coming at her like that. Because here's the thing people forget when they flatten Harry into a single narrative. Before any of the later ruptures, before Megxit, before the memoir, before any of it, he and his grandmother had a genuinely close relationship. He was the grandson who made her laugh, the one who didn't stand on ceremony around her. Some of that came from being the spare rather than the heir. Less weight, more room to just be a person in her company. So when Anson describes the Queen being very worried rather than simply offended, that reads less like wounded pride and more like a grandmother watching someone she loved behave in a way that felt out of character. A sign, maybe, that something underneath was off. And Anson apparently thought so too. According to what she told Smith, the Queen came away from that meeting believing Harry seemed lovesick and indecisive. Someone not entirely steady, 3 months out from one of the biggest decisions of his life. It's worth pausing on how loaded that reading is. Lovesick isn't a criticism of Meghan, it's a description of Harry. Of a man the Queen worried might be moving fast, moving emotionally, without the usual caution she'd watched him apply to everything else in his royal life up to that point. Whether that assessment was fair is genuinely up for debate, but it's clearly what she believed in that specific window of early 2018, with the wedding bearing down and tempers running thin on both sides. There was a wider layer to this too, beyond the Archbishop and the dress and the 10 minutes. Smith's account through Anson describes the Queen as troubled by something else entirely: friction between Meghan and William and Catherine. Not detailed publicly at the time, but apparently noticed at the highest level, well before any of it became public conversation years later. That detail changes how you read everything that followed. Because for years, the public narrative around William, Catherine, and Meghan's relationship arrived almost entirely after Megxit, filtered through interviews, through memoirs, through carefully worded statements from opposing camps. What Anson's account suggests is that the Queen was clocking tension between the two households months before the wedding even happened, not after, before. Across social media in the days since Smith's Substack post circulated, one question kept coming up. If the Queen sensed trouble this early, why did the wedding proceed with such visible warmth? The photographs from May 2018 show a family that looks, by every outward measure, unified. Harry beaming, the Queen smiling in her signature bright color. Nothing in the public footage hints at a 10-minute clash 3 months earlier. It's worth setting this against what came out later in Harry's own memoir. Spare described plenty of friction around that same period. Tension over his role, over expectations, over how much independence he and Meghan would actually be given once married. None of it, notably, mentioned this specific February meeting. Whether that's because Harry didn't consider it significant or because it simply didn't fit the story he wanted to tell, is something only he could answer. Either way, it's a gap worth noticing. A biographer working from a grandmother's confidant is filling in a moment the prince's own account left out entirely. That's not necessarily contradiction, though. It might be something closer to how this family has always operated: private friction, public composure. A source close to the situation told reporters covering Smith's revelations that whatever frustrations existed during planning, there remained genuine affection between the Queen and Harry, and a real desire on both sides to find a way through it. Another source described the Queen as someone who was less upset by disagreements themselves than by the tone in which they unfolded. Meaning it wasn't really about the Archbishop or the dress, it was about how her grandson spoke to her while asking. That framing might be the most human part of this whole story, because most families know this exact dynamic. It's rarely the actual disagreement that lingers. It's the way it was delivered. What makes this account land differently than the usual wave of Harry and the family stories is the chain of custody behind it. This isn't an anonymous aide talking to a gossip outlet in 2018, in the heat of wedding season, with an axe to grind. This is a woman who died in 2020, sharing a private recollection with a biographer she trusted, published years later with no obvious commercial urgency behind the timing. That doesn't make it beyond question. Anson isn't here to be cross-examined, and secondhand palace accounts, however well-sourced, always carry an asterisk, but it does make it different in kind from most of what circulates about this era of the family. And it reframes something people have debated for years. Was the rupture between Harry and the institution sudden, sparked entirely by Meghan's arrival? Or was there already a strain, a communication gap, showing up in small procedural fights months before anyone outside the family noticed? 10 minutes in February 2018 might be the earliest visible crack in a story that wouldn't fully surface for another 4 years. Whether that crack ever really closed or just got papered over for the cameras is something even the people closest to the Queen may never fully agree on. What's clear is that the Queen never treated it as disqualifying. She walked Harry down that aisle's timeline anyway, gave her blessing, hosted the reception, wore the color she wanted to wear. Whatever worry sat underneath the surface that February, it didn't stop her from showing up fully for her grandson in May. That's arguably the most telling part of Anson's account. Not the conflict itself, but how quickly the Queen moved past it, at least outwardly, for the sake of the day. People who knew her well often describe that same instinct elsewhere in her life. Hold the disagreement privately, present the unity publicly, and let time do whatever work reconciliation requires. Whether that approach actually resolved anything between her and Harry, or simply delayed a reckoning that arrived 4 years later in far more public form, is a question this account doesn't answer. It only tells us the reckoning didn't start with Meghan. It started earlier, quieter, in a room with just the two of them. We'll keep watching what else comes out of these unpublished accounts. If there's more where this came from, Royal Archives will be the first to bring it to you.